Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Wilmington Wildwood Building Committee to order on this evening of January the 10th, 2024. Time is 6:05 p.m. First, to begin, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We're looking for a roll call.
Thank you. Paul Ruggiero?
Ruggiero.
Ruggiero?
Yeah.
I will get this right one
Okay.
day. Diane Allen?
That's right. Just send it around here.
Send. John Holloway? Absent. Greg Bendel? Kevin Kyra? Kate Bissell, you mentioned will be coming in. Stacy Scott? Christine Holleran? Here. Alice Brown LeGrand? Here. George Hooper? Susan Inman?
Here.
Brian Perry? Paul Melargani?
Melorani.
Melarani? So close. David Ragsdale? Mary Ann Galezzo? Michael? Here. Craig?
Here.
Maggie Lopez? Christine Pendergrast?
Here.
Justin?
Here.
Dr. Brand?
Here.
And Dennis Kelly?
Here.
And myself.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the second item on our agenda this evening is the approval of minutes from the December 13th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Thank you.
Discussion.
Discussion?
I was not present for that meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'm not present, so that's fine. Thank you. Okay.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second for the approval?
Second.
Thank you. We do need a roll call for approval of those.
I'll just go through the first names. Paul?
Yes.
Christine?
Here.
Alice?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Paul?
Abstain?
Michael?
Yes.
Craig? Christine?
Approve.
Justin?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Dr. Brand?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Great, thank you. Third item tonight, approval of invoices. With that, Julie?
Yep. Good evening. This evening, we will be presenting warrant article number 7 for the month of December. First up is SMMA's invoice for feasibility study in the amount of $7,500. Next is Doran Whittier's basic services for feasibility study in the amount of $31,500 for a total of $39,000. Susan Inman will make the recommendation.
The Finance Working Group has reviewed all invoices and makes the motion to move them forward for payment. And then I have a
Second.
second.
Roll call.
Paul?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Craig? Christine?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Yes.
Glenn? And myself, yes.
Great, thanks, everyone, and thanks for the working group. We are moving on to item number 4, a review of preliminary design options. Just before we turn it over to our partners at Doran Whittier, lots of activity has been unfolding over the course of the last number of weeks, actually more than that, really, starting before the holiday break. When I say we, just to clarify so everyone around the table who's not been present has a sense of this, in addition to Julie LeDuc as the owner's project manager and members of the design team from Doran Whittier, members of the central office leadership team, which include Alice, Paul, myself, along with other members, the 3 principals who are connected with the schools potentially that will be connected with this project of course, that includes the Wildwood, the Woburn, and the North, along with members of the town officials. Dennis has been present, and Susan, for many of those meetings. We did extend an invitation to all of the 3 locally elected boards. We have 2 members of the school committee who have been regularly attending those meetings. The work that you'll see, more than a preview to, but really a deeper dive tonight, item number 4, is a culmination of our work together and Doran Whittier's team taking all that they've heard from many folks here in our community around what the spatial needs might be for these buildings. So this is a really important step forward, and with that, I think I'll turn it over to Jason. Not to Jason, to Ron.
Thank you, Dr. Moran. Good evening, everybody. So we are here to share with you, and it's very exciting, but these are the start of preliminary conceptual options. On the screen, there are the potential of 18 options that we can study as part of this process. Right now, we have the 3 columns that indicate the pre-K, pre-K3, and pre-K5 configurations, and within those, we'll be looking at repair options, add reno, and new. So we shared this with you last meeting in December. For today, we'll be focusing on the pre-K5 options. We'll be looking at a new option at Wildwood, a new option at Woburn, an add reno and new option at North Intermediate. This is just the start of this process. It's important to know that we will need to continue looking at all of these configurations, I should say, as part of the process moving into the next phase with the MSBA.
A couple of things about these options. It's important to note that, right, the Dorn Whittier team, the folks that we've been working with from the district, right, we have no sort of preconceived disposition about what the right answer is at this point. We're just working our way through exploring the entirety of the options, and we've started with the pre-K5 grade configuration because it's the largest possible project, and if it fits on these various sites that we're exploring, it's likely that the other options fit also. So we're sort of starting with the hardest and working our way back towards the easiest. So we don't want you to read anything into the sequence in which we're presenting about, preferences or priority, because we haven't gotten there yet. Essentially what we're focusing on at this particular moment is, can we accomplish the goals that came out of the visioning? We'll go over sort of some of those outcomes that we've synthesized to date. Does a concept fit on a particular site? And then in this particular step, we're looking for feedback. We've already received some, but we're looking for feedback from this group on how these concepts could potentially be better. So just like our meeting last time, we invite questions, we invite commentary as we work our way through these, particularly related to that last question. Yes?
I just have a question when you say that. Is there a generality to be drawn from your experience on a renovation cost, I know renovation might be renovation/new, cost versus a brand-new cost? In some circumstances, we find renovation can be more expensive. I just didn't know if that's an assumption that only my brain is making and it's not correct,
It's a terrific question, and the MSBA has a tremendous amount of data around this question. I think we would respond to that question this way. The MSBA data shows a series of lines. The top line, the most expensive line, is new construction. Right? The second line is additions and renovation. And the third line is sort of non-school sector averages. But the devil is in the details. Those costs per square foot that form up that middle line for ad reno, even though in that data they're cheaper than new construction, they don't factor in things like swing space or total duration of construction or all of the other factors that happen to be different about ad reno versus new construction. So in most of the projects we've worked on, when you factor those other things in, additions and renovations actually turn out to be either as expensive or more expensive than new construction. So when we talk about cost estimates and we start looking at numbers, it'll be important to consider the totality of the costs, not just the simple construction costs. Don or Ronnie, you guys want to add anything to that? Julie?
Can I jump in on that? And one of the reasons why swing space is not considered is because it's an unreimbursable cost. The MSBA will not pay for modular trailers. So that would be costs out of your pocket that you can never recoup. So once and there can be upwards of $1 million of, depending upon obviously the size and how many, but that's one of the factors that we always find when we talk about these things. Do you have a place for them to go? Because if not, you're purchasing modular trailers that you'll never do anything with afterwards. So, it's an out-of-pocket expense. So, Don?
Does that answer your question, Susan?
It really does, thank you, because that's kind of what I was thinking about it, having been through a renovation in a town hall even previously to what's going on in our thing. We really had to move out, we had to organize, luckily, it happened to be at the time when everybody was starting to work from home, and we did that, but it would have cost a lot of money, and the trailers, we were shocked at how much they cost, and like you said, there was no getting, even in that circumstance, it was a lot of money to put out, added to the project that was already expensive.
And not to belabor this, but the impact on the daily operations of the school
Right.
during this construction, student learning, teachers, parents coming and going and whatnot, and the resulting school, which could end up with spaces smaller than you may desire. Just because the MSBA has their guidelines for the spaces that they require with their educational specifications, they will accept smaller classroom spaces, which ultimately may not meet your needs. So those are all considerations. Doesn't mean we can't do it. Those are all considerations we need to.
Yeah, I'm not trying to
Think about.
slant against that at all in any way, I had
Yeah,
my
and-
own experience with that, so
And every building is unique, and the cost estimates associated with each version of addition renovation are different, and so we'll see how the cost estimates come out for the ones that we consider here. Just to remind everybody, sort of the basis of the concepts we're going to show you, there are some key bits of information that came out of visioning. What's on the screen right now is one of them. This is the overall building diagram for the pre-K-5 grade configuration. It represents what we're trying to achieve in terms of how the building is organized, key things like the separation of public and private spaces, and other key adjacencies. And so this is one of those key tools that we've used to develop the information we're going to show tonight. A second one is the program. This is what we shared with you last time, a listing of all of the spaces that we think are necessary to deliver the education that's going to occur in this project for this grade configuration. And then the final one is the set of guiding principles, right? How well are we achieving this list of objectives? And just one note about this, on the second page of this, when we met with you last time, several things came up that you thought it was important to add to these sets of guiding principles. So we won't go through them in detail here, but we've added them here in blue. Things like the cafeteria should have a certain kind of sight lines. The location of playgrounds and green space should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. So we did hear you, and we've added those to the list of guiding principles, and we've tried to fold those in to our conceptual design work for tonight.
And these guiding principles will continue to evolve, similar to like the Sustainability Committee, once we start meeting, may add one or two guidelines into this list as well. So this will continue to evolve through this process. So we haven't shared with you the existing site conditions visually. So this is a diagram of the North Intermediate site. This is the first one we're starting with. We've talked about it being a 14-acre site. It's in a residential zoning district of R20, which dictates the setbacks. So the front yard setback would be 40 feet from Salem Street, and along the side and back property lines, that would be a setback of 20 feet. And these are all restrictions for us as we're placing the building. And so part of when we look at the existing conditions and constraints on the site, it's to tell us where the best location would be to place an addition or a new construction on the site. On the north site specifically, there are wetlands on the southwest corner. It's the blue area that you see. The darker blue area is the wetland itself. And then around a wetland, there's usually a 100-foot buffer that we should not be placing a building within. If we do, there's different constraints and requirements that we would have to adhere to, such as potentially replacing that area somewhere else on site, or other types of kind of back and forths to be able to build in that area. But we do our best to avoid that. The other things that we look at are what amenities are on site right now. We have a parking lot right now. There's approximately 60 parking spaces in the parking lot. The playgrounds, the courts, the baseball field. Those are all amenities that we have to consider when we design a new site circulation around this area, and what would be either an ad reno or a new building on this site, how the building will work, and how the circulation will work around the building, as well as what amenities can we provide. The other thing to note on this site is that there is a slight elevation change. It runs from the south corner near Salem Street and goes towards the center of the property, and there's approximately a 10-foot elevation, and you'll see how that impacts some of the concepts that we'll show you today. So when we take all of that information into consideration, this is the approximate buildable area that we have noted on the site. It'll work around the existing building, and it will also work around the buffer zones and the setbacks.
Yeah, and let me just add there, Ronnie, that we're operating under the assumption that anything that happens on this site will need to happen while the existing building not only remains occupied, but remains operational. And so that will factor into where and how construction can take place here.
Does buildable area mean not just the building, but also parking and the playground spaces?
Yes, but as you can see, for example, the parking lot here, the existing parking lot does go right to Ballard Street. So there are, like, some of the site amenities can encroach within the setbacks, just the building itself we would try to stay.
And from a constructability point of view, we will need to study which of those existing features either need to move or be temporarily relocated during construction. But the task at hand is, in the finished condition, will the project ultimately fit on this particular site? Then we'll have to work out the details and the construction logistics once a particular option gets developed. So this first option, our naming convention is you'll see it in the sort of the lower right-hand corner of the slide, the grade configuration, and then followed by an alphanumeric sort of code. So N1 is new construction, the first one we're showing you. So you'll see that change as we go through the four options that we're going to see tonight. So this first diagram is a conceptual site plan of what a new project, pre-K5 project, might look like on the north site. So what we're showing here, essentially on the existing fields, is a 3-story building, sort of a backwards C shape. You've got the existing building being demolished. It's the heavy dashed line there to the right-hand side of the diagram. And then you've got a series of driveways, parking, green space, playgrounds elsewhere on the site. I'll just quickly sort of go through how the site works from a site circulation point of view and where some of those amenities are. So if we start down at the bottom of the drawing at the southern end of the site, there's a curb cut there where we would expect parent vehicles, deliveries, thank you, Ronnie, and buses to enter the site. Parents would continue straight and then navigate around to the loop. The big red triangle you see is the main entry. So students would be loaded and unloaded in that loop. The little triangle that you see is representative of a dedicated pre-K entry and potentially the entry for things like drive-up services. There's a number of children who receive drive-up services as part of a project like this. And then parents would exit the site the same way they came. Buses would enter the same way, but then they would veer off to the left and circumnavigate the building. We've got some data around how many students in this grade configuration are riding the bus. So they would circulate and then they would line along what is the northeast side of this concept, and again, load and unload very close to the front door, and then they would exit out the site there to the curb cut that's north up on Ballard Vale. In terms of other site features, we've got the bulk of the faculty and staff parking along Salem Street and Ballard Vale, with what we're calling a field, a major green space between the building and that parking lot. It happens to be sized such that it wouldn't necessarily be any sort of regulation field, but it would be, as is written in the guiding principles, sort of the maximum flat green space that we could provide in that particular location. Playgrounds are around the west side of the building. One of the bits of feedback that we got from our expanded working group was perhaps to take the bus loop and the emergency vehicle access and actually slide it even further west so that those playgrounds could be inside the traffic circulation rather than across the road. So we've already received some of those kinds of feedback that we'll be picking up in our next iteration. So we've got 3 separate playground zones shown in each of the concepts of pre-KK a 1, 2, and a 3 through 5. And then we've got some hardscape outdoor learning, and we've got some gesture of just general open grass area that could be part of the playground experience. Any questions about, yes?
So, the way I see it, I'm thinking to myself, why have that traffic go around the school, especially with all those play areas here, whether they're inside the roadside or outside the road? Why not just have the bus traffic go in front of the school and then go out right?
It's a terrific question. From a safety point of view, it's best if we separate parent vehicles from buses and not have that traffic commingled. And because of the sheer volume of buses, we're talking about potentially 11 buses that we're planning for here. The length that we would need in the afternoon for all of those buses to queue up plays a role. And so in this case, the way we're trying to achieve that separation and that queue length is by taking advantage of what we would likely need anyway as an emergency vehicle access road as part of the bus circulation route.
Is there any reason why the entrance is on the south side versus the northeast side? So clockwise versus counterclockwise?
Again, good question. And the answer is yes, particularly for buses, but also for parent vehicles. The safest loading and unloading circumstance is if the passenger side is facing the building, right, facing the sidewalk. So students aren't traveling between vehicles to access the sidewalk.
Jason, so if you move that road out, right, how does that affect the fire department as far as their needs? Now they're further away from the building. If there is a fire, if they have to drive around back.
Yeah, good question. And we'll have some conversations with them as we move through the design progress. Some of the things that they're often concerned about is, what if that exterior wall of the building falls over and they want their vehicles to be a certain distance away from the building? So maybe there's a sweet spot that we have to find with them, and that's what we would need to do to fine tune that as it loops around the building. Okay. As everyone remembers, the MSBA is going to require us to study 3 flavors of all 3 of these grade configurations: repair, ad reno, and new. And so this is an all-new construction option. It happens to be 3 stories. In terms of the construction phasing, while we don't have all of the specific logistics worked out, in crude terms, you could build the existing building on the fields while the existing building is occupied, move everyone in pre-K-5 all at once, demolish the existing building, and then finish the site work. It's sort of the second cleanest version of construction phasing that's possible. This is what the site plan looks like with the individual spaces populated on the first floor. We wanted to do this sort of for 2 reasons. One, we want to sort of share the big picture of how much detail has gone into thinking about the shapes that you're seeing. So we have thought through all of those adjacencies that are represented in the overall building diagram to get here. We didn't just draw a random shape on the site. We have thought about all of the inner workings of the plan. But 2, to sort of share with you that the public spaces, what you're seeing in orange is the gym, what you're seeing in green is the cafeteria, what you're seeing in teal right by the front door is the administration guidance, that this concept does express that idea of separating public and private. The public things are more to the upper right of the drawing, and the more private academic things are to the lower left. In fact, on the next slide, I think there's a diagram of that, that this particular concept achieves that one particular objective really well.
Can I just have you back
Yes.
up one slide?
Sure,
Sorry.
of course.
The yellow space there and the angled front of the building, and the yellow space is just like hallway? Is that right?
The tan space, it's circulation space, yes. However, at this level of development, what's not in the drawing are all of the custodial closets, it's all of the electrical rooms, all of the IDF closets. We do have some placeholders in here for individual toilet rooms, but that tan that you're seeing that looks like a really fat corridor
Yep.
will get gobbled up with those other things.
And the angles work for you, huh?
Well,
I just see a lot of open space there, and we're going to be paying for square footage that is going to be open space.
Well, at the end of the day, there's a target square footage that we're trying to hit, and all of the options should be either in that range or less. And so In a drawing like this, invariably, the square footage that's represented there is larger than what it will really be when we get further along in the design process. If we test something that's bigger and then we shrink it down to, exactly what it's supposed to be, that's typically how it works. As far as the angles go, because we developed this option first, many of the angles are responding to what's happening with the property line that's close by, so that we can squeak a road around. Other angles in the academic wing are responding to things like, one of the ideas that came out of visioning was, yes, we have these individual grade level teams, but we'd like the geometry to be expressed in such a way that when we have a bubble year, that a classroom can be captured from another grade level team to serve as an expansion opportunity for that one. So the angles in the academic wing are trying to respond to that rather than have, strictly isolated grade level teams. And there's actually a diagram for the ad reno that we're working on that more does that than what's being shown here.
I'm not so worried about the academic space than I am with the front of the building and those angles there. I just, if this comes to fruition, I hate to be standing in a hallway that's 15 feet wide for no good reason.
Yep, and we'll take that as feedback. That's exactly what we want to hear, that question of how can we make this better?
Yep.
Trying to be, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, try to be as efficient with space as
Yep.
possible, right? We
Well, we don't build the square footage if we don't need it. That all factors in the cost,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely, and we hear
Is
that.
that where the collaboration spaces go, though?
In this case, diagrammatically, no. So you're talking about the extended learning spaces, some of those breakout spaces. Ronnie, maybe you can put your cursor. So these little blue sort of jelly bean shapes that are between classrooms out there in that circulation space, those are the designated extended learning spaces. So there is some areas in this particular diagram that could be squeezed out as we get further along in the design process, and we'll do everything we can to do that, to squeeze that out.
In crude terms, it's like drawing with a fat Sharpie versus, a fine ballpoint pen, right?
I get
So
that.
we're just at that phase right now.
All great feedback. Any other questions or comments about this particular concept?
For the second and third floors, is there a different circulation for the students who get upstairs, or is it, I see the classrooms are kind of stacked on the second and third floor. Do the students who come in that front entrance go upstairs a different way, or?
So with this particular projector, it's a little hard to see where the stairs are, but there are 4 stairs that are essentially at the 4 corners of the academic wings.
Okay.
And so presumably, if students are arriving at the front door, let's say if you're 5th grade and you're trying to get to the far grade level team on the 3rd floor, you would go up the stair, can you show it there? Yeah, right there, up to the 3rd floor to your grade
Yeah,
level
this
team.
is more of are the older kids passing the younger kids? Are we separating a little bit?
In this particular diagram, it actually works out really well that to get from your classroom team to art or to gym or to the cafeteria, you don't have to travel through anyone else's team to get to where you're going. And that's an ideal situation. It doesn't always work out that way, but in this particular diagram, that particular circulation strategy works pretty well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Susan?
With the extended learning spaces, this might be a question for the teacher or the administration. Back in the day, it was like we weren't allowed in the hallways, without a teacher. And I just wondered, did those spaces make you extend staff, like grow your staff because you need people in those spaces that aren't otherwise in the classroom? I just was curious.
Yes, maybe I'll let Glenn, you respond to that first.
The two don't have to go hand in hand. There's a couple of things. First off, the way that the design of these classrooms can be, where there is the visibility for students, depending on how they're designed. That's number one. And number two, what we're really talking about here is, in a lot of our circumstances, because of the structures of our buildings, there may be support services that are coming, that are required for children, but they have to go out, down the hall, somewhere else in the building.
Gotcha.
Those can be brought to the classrooms in closer proximity and allow for greater collaboration. So there's multiple uses of these extended learning spaces
Okay, thank you.
that really you can often find in modern or contemporary schools now.
Yeah, but having those spaces, at least in our experience, has not led to a need for more staff. That the architecture allows them to be either passively supervised or to be occupied, as you say, by student service support professionals.
And just one final point on this, because we have to plan for the staff for this, for whatever facilities to come here, I think we've spoken about the educational program plan previously. We are not adding staff if we do have these extended learning spaces to work with. We're utilizing the staff in a comparable way to what we have in our buildings right now, so.
Perfect, thank you very much.
So the next concept is the same site. We're still at the North Intermediate site, and I'll just draw everybody's attention again to the lower right-hand corner. This is a new concept, the next concept. It happens to be addition renovation, so its alphanumeric code is AR for addition renovation, and it's the first one we're showing you. So again, here you see the project footprint. Obviously, it's not the same shape as the existing building. Again, the big red arrow indicates where the front door is. The little red arrow indicates a place where pre-K entry and drive-up services could occur. In terms of the site, this concept operates a little bit differently. And again, maybe Ronnie, you can help me with the cursor. This time we'll start with the buses. They would enter from Ballardvale up at the northern curb cut. They would enter the site and actually circulate through the large staff parking lot, and then load and unload along the north edge of the concept, right there where Ronnie's cursor is, and then they would exit out the site the same way. Parent vehicles would enter the southernmost curb cut along Salem Street. They would bear a little bit to the right, Ronnie, right, and then go left, yep. And they would circulate up along this western edge of the main body of the concept, and then they would turn and head back out the way they did before. So unlike the N1 concept, the level of separation between buses and parent vehicles is even greater in this concept than we saw there. The queue length for the parents is actually a little shorter here compared to what we saw before. And then you'll see that we have 3 different parking areas. We've able to get one between the building and the wetlands, the main one in the back on the fields, and a third one sort of over by the public side. And we'll get into the floor plans in just a moment. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Well, looking at all these parking lots and the shapes and the sizes, this is gonna be a lot more difficult for like the DPW to do snow removal, because you're looking at where you're gonna put some of the snow on some of these designs, because you're getting so creative with the design.
Yep, snow removal is certainly something that we have to consider. And we would certainly want to work with DPW on the geometries and whether there are islands or there aren't islands, where the snow is going to go when we have it, where's it going to be stored. But again, at this particular moment in the process, we're just trying to demonstrate that we can get approximately the right number of parking spaces on the site.
Okay.
And then if we need to alter the geometry or nuance the geometry, that process will come. And speaking of parking spaces for the pre-K-5 enrollment, we're targeting around 180 spaces in these first 2 concepts. The site diagrams achieve that, and some of the ones that you'll see in just a moment, they fall short of that. In terms of other site amenities, we've got some pickleball courts there by the large faculty parking lot to the north. We've got the 3 playgrounds just beyond what is an emergency vehicle connector between the 2 parking lots. And then in this case, we have a more contiguous green space. It's about the same total green space as we saw in the previous option, but in this case, it happens to all be contiguous. Still probably not large enough for a regulation field of any kind, but could be appropriate for something like a series of smaller U8 soccer fields, for example, multi-purpose environment.
Jason, what would you estimate the queuing line for the parent line to be?
We'd have to measure it and count cars. Based on what we know about the bus count, it's likely that far more students will arrive on bus than on car, which is atypical for our projects, and we'll continue to study that. But when we go to evaluate these options in a few weeks, we'll bring that data back to you to say, hey, this queue length is 27 cars and this queue length is 80, whatever it is, if that's important information.
My experience at Woburn Street right now is on average, there's probably 36 cars at pickup.
Okay.
And that's only first, second, and third.
Yep.
One of the things when we actually select an option and a site, we will do a traffic study, and that will help inform us on, do we need to add lights? Do we, need to add a crossing guard? Do we need to add, different site amenities and features to help with traffic? So that's definitely something we'll look at once a selected site is up, a site is selected.
What's the increase in students and automobiles compared to what we have on the site now?
So the proposed enrollment here, including pre-K, is going to be around 855. Somebody help me out with the current enrollment at Northwich at grades 4 and 5. 250. So
250?
250. So it would be more than triple, right? Which is why the need for all of the additional parking and being carefully thoughtful with how the site circulation and vehicle queuing works.
This is not a town-wide school, right?
This is not a town-wide school. This is a,
Neighborhood school.
For the north side.
Yeah,
North side,
yeah.
three schools, yeah.
great questions. Any other questions or feedback about this particular concept? Okay. Something to note about this, you can just make it out and running, maybe you can help me. Here's the site plan with the first floor inlaid. The area that's got the hatch pattern, the diagonal hatch pattern, is the portion of the existing building that's going to remain. Right? It's essentially the core of the building, everything except the academic wing. And that has to do with how many grade level teams we have and the ability to not build on top of the existing academic wing. So you can see over in the right-hand margin that this turns out to be a 4-story concept.
Jason, so you talk about getting rid of the academic wing and saving the gym, the cafeteria. Is that structure worth doing something like that? Looking, have you toured it? Is it, like, as we look further down, I mean, I'm in the boiler room all the time, I'm in the old locker rooms, that's what you're saving, and we use that as an accessory space, and I know we'll rip it all down and move some walls you can, but.
So in this case, what that lower level is being used for is the kitchen, the mechanical plant, and some storage. So there's no classrooms down there, there's no offices down there. We're just simply taking advantage of what's there for those kinds of functions. When we were exploring this, and of course we can always do more explorations, we found that we were gobbling up far too much site and keeping the academic wing instead. You can imagine trying to convert an academic wing to things like the cafeteria or to the library, and then not being able to stack, 3 stories instead of where it's only 2-story structure currently. So in this particular concept, we've chosen to keep the core of the existing building, and then I think, as everybody knows, even this part of the existing building, even though it's technically 2 stories, has a lot of different intermediate levels, right? There are actually 4 different levels in just that moment of the building. So we would need to resolve all of the accessibility issues associated with those multi-levels, and we've tried to think through some of that. And the consequence of that in the existing building is when you try to make an addition next to that that has to line up with some of that stuff, you end up with what is essentially a split-level design, even for the new part of the building, where one new addition is here and the other new addition is here, and then you stack that multiple times on top of each other. So that's what's happening in this particular concept.
And just to clarify, my man, this is not unique. I mean, I know many of you know our buildings, but perhaps not all. We have other buildings. The Woburn Street is another example where there are these multi-levels, 2 steps here, 3 steps there. And that's, at the time that those were built, it was a different era, a different time period from an accessibility standpoint, a whole other host of factors or problems with that, right, that have to be resolved, as you said.
So if you actually go to the next slide, Ronnie. Oh, we did, okay. What ends up happening is, yes, this concept would be fully accessible and meet the ADA and MAAB codes, but there would be a series of ramps and elevators to make all of that work. And right, when we get to evaluating options, we have to ask ourselves, is that the right thing? Is that right, or the best thing to do for children, particularly of the youngest children? Even though it's an ad reno, this does reasonably well, separating public stuff from academic and private stuff. But in terms of, here's what I was thinking. This is the renovated portion, as I mentioned, and this is where we've documented that it's multi-levels, and we would need new elevators and ramps to make it fully accessible. The addition essentially wraps the existing building on 3 sides. Can you go to the next slide, Ronnie? Wraps the addition on 3 sides, and even though it's brand new construction, to fit everything in this particular moment on the site, it would be 4 stories. And even in those 4 stories of new construction, there would be multiple levels in order to manage the existing floor-to-floor heights.
When it comes to renovating the existing space, does it get renovated such that windows, doors, everything gets replaced to match and fit in? Everything is air conditioned at all? It appears seamless?
Yep, great question. So if you were to walk in to an ad reno after it's complete, you wouldn't know that part of it was renovated. Everything would look and appear brand new, right? And would be fully code compliant and all of those things. So we mentioned the construction phasing on the previous option was relatively simple. This one is much more complicated. We'd need to start by building roughly 2/3 of the addition. We can't build the portion of the addition that overlaps the existing building, so we have to build part of the new addition first. Then we would knock down the academic wing of the existing building after grades 4 and 5 only move in. Then we would renovate and add on that area there in orange, and then in a last step, move everybody else over and complete the site work. So construction is happening up against the existing building. It's happening in the existing building. The students have occupied the addition. So the construction phasing and experience during construction is much different for this option than it would be for the previous option.
In your experience comparing the new build versus this kind of phasing, how much longer is this to construct, to swing between
You want
years?
to take that, Don?
So twice as long?
Could be up to a year.
And just while we're on this, I do think it's important to point out, and I know we've talked about this before, and some of us, myself included, have experience. This kind of project can be done while school's in session. You mentioned earlier, Don, about the interruption inevitably and the challenges that it presents, but it can be done. It can be done safely. There are ways to get there, and I've been myself in this kind of project at a middle school where this was happening. But it's more complicated, it takes more time, and there's just a lot more things to think through, as opposed to the clean, separate build that you talked about earlier.
Right.
I'm going to move on to the Woburn Street site. This again here is the existing conditions of the site. It's a 10-acre property. The setbacks are the same as they were at North Intermediate, being that it's also categorized as an R20 residential area. The differences on this site are that there is a wellhead protection area, which is that purple kind of swatch that you're seeing on the top north end of the site. It doesn't impact where we can build, to tell you the truth. It just has to do with what gets infiltrated into the ground. So for example, if we were building a car wash, we would not want the gray water to go into the ground. But being that this is a school, we would be controlling all of the discharge that happens from the building. So we would have systems in place. So this really wouldn't impact us being able to build on the north end of the site. The other big thing here is that there are a considerable number of fields on this space, as well as the playground that's in a lower, on the west side of the site. And you can see that there's a greater elevation change. On the south end of the site, there's a 25-foot elevation change from Woburn Street to the the west property line. And on the north end of the site, from High Street down towards the west end of the site, you'll see about a 15-foot elevation change. This will impact constructability when we think about retaining walls, which you already see on this property, and just navigating the slope as we're trying to figure out where to place the building, as well as constructability. Oh, one more thing I do want to mention, and I don't believe I mentioned this for North Intermediate site, but the infrastructure here, we have municipal water, but this is on septic. The North Intermediate site, that site is actually the only one that's both on municipal water and municipal sewer. So that being said, technically, the entire site is buildable, but we would have to factor in the grade changes and just navigating around the site to see what makes the most sense with the existing building in place.
So with this concept, we've taken a very similar geometry to what we saw in option N1, the new at North, and attempted to position this in the widest part of the site, the northernmost part of the site. But you can see that even when we position it in that fat part of the site, it does overlap the existing building a little bit. Again, the big red arrow is the front door, the little red arrow is pre-K entry and drive-up services. The way the site works here, parent vehicles would enter the site, and if they're K through 5 at the lower end, at the south end of the site, they would make a right-hand turn towards the front door. They would queue up through the parking lot and discharge in that semicircle up near the building, and then they would exit out the way they came. Pre-K students would continue down the hill, parents would continue down the hill and use the lower loop to load and unload children to go in the pre-K entry, and then they would circulate back out the way they came. Buses would also enter that southernmost curb cut, and they would loop around the building to the north all the way towards the front door and load and unload again at the front door. So that, again, the passenger side is on the sidewalk side, and they would exit out. Yes, go ahead, Vivian.
What would happen to the circulation if you have two children, one in the preschool and one in the elementary? How are they circulating?
Parents' choice. Right. Operationally, you'd need to figure that out. You could say everybody is dropping off at the front door. We were just looking to take advantage of the extra queue length that is afforded by sending some parents, down the hill. It's important to note here, Ronnie mentioned retaining wall. You'll see a couple of heavy black lines. What we did with the concept is we've taken the 3-story academic wing and pushed it down one floor. So the lowest level of the academic wing is at the bottom of the hill, where the front door is essentially the middle level of the concept, is at the same level as Salem Street. So that makes it necessary to think about how we get vehicles and children and playgrounds on that lower level. And so the longest fat black line is an extensive retaining wall where we would need to regrade the site in order to allow those other site features to take place down at the bottom of the hill. When we get to the construction phasing, we'll talk about what would have to happen with the existing building first in order to execute this concept. Questions about the site plan? Yeah, Craig, is it Craig?
Yes.
Craig.
And I assume it's too early to do any sort of, there'd be no reason to do any sort of cut fill calcs on if it's net import or export.
I don't know, do you want to answer that, Don?
Yes,
Sorry, what
but
I'm talking about soil removal.
understood. Oh, yeah, for everyone else, yeah, no, good question. It's certainly something that we'll consider, and as we follow these through this particular phase, the PDP phase, we'll get a sense for what that may be as we entertain our costs. But there won't be a full-blown cut-fill analysis at this time.
We are trying to be sensitive to that particular variable. For example, when Ronnie showed the site analysis, there's a 15-foot elevation change on this north end of the site, and that happens to line up really nicely with modern floor-to-floor height construction of around 14'8", give or take. So if we were able to execute that, it would limit the need to do cut-fill on that part of the site. And the concept is trying to simply regrade what's already here, not necessarily import a lot or export a lot, but we wouldn't do any sort of formal analysis of that until probably we pick a single option. Yes.
It strikes me that, say, in a perfect world, we chose this site and we chose new construction for this site, for the sake of savings, that, we could tweak the shape of the building so it doesn't overlap the original building, and you could have seamless operation of the original building until the new building's open. Is that right? Or
Maybe. We're talking about 165,000 square feet. This is a pretty compact layout as it is. And as Ronnie mentioned, we have setback requirements. We've got to be able to get vehicles around the edges. So perhaps the geometry of this could be massaged a little bit and everything could go north just a little bit.
are you married to that shape?
No, absolutely not.
Because I'm thinking like that, like the angles just bother me in this drawing, like in the front of the school there. The front being the left side, and if you bump that out, you could pull back some square footage from this way. You see what I'm saying? So there's some wiggle room. I know everything's modular in your drawings, and you're able to do that stuff, but I would hate to commit to something that would overlap an existing building. And
Yeah, and this is actually a really important point, Paul. What we're doing right now are test fits, and we're actively looking for feedback. And nothing in the drawings is set in stone.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So there's lots of time to, right, we joke in our office that we're dealing with marshmallows right now.
I have just worked with architects that just like see something and marry something, and prying it from their dead fingers is tough to do.
I can assure you, you don't have to worry about that
Okay,
with us, right?
okay.
We want to deliver a project that works for you.
Yeah, good.
We have a lot of clients that say, we want a nice-looking building, but we're not interested in architectural vanity,
Good.
right? And we feel that here, and,
Yeah.
right, you're not going to hurt feelings here. We want to do a nice building, but we're not married to any specific geometry at this point in particular. Go ahead, Dennis.
We talked the other day that if this was the site, we'd probably need to put a treatment facility in for the waste because it's on septic. You don't show that in the picture. Is that an above-ground thing or an in-the-ground thing?
We don't
Because-
know yet.
Because that could take up square footage that you're not, that was thinking as green space or parking lot.
It very well could.
So,
And we have it on our list of things to discuss with our consultant team. And in our next round of iteration, based on this feedback that we're getting, we'll try to show something related to that in our next set of drawings.
and when they build something like that, is it usually a large building, or if it's above ground, or, and obviously you don't know yet above or below, but if it was above, are they, 100 by 100, are they 20 by 20? How big is a treatment facility?
It basically depends on flows and how big it needs to be. Often you'll see a combination of some sort of a control building on top with a lot of chambers below, right?
Yep,
For equipment and for handling flow.
okay.
But a lot of it could end up being under a field.
Oh, okay.
Typically, I think we try to put them underground, so we're not taking away from
Any
the site.
space.
Right. Yeah, Susan?
Does the green at the top of the screen abutting the roadway have to be there for setback requirements, or is that something that the whole picture can move up to get away from the building?
This area?
There are, no, I think she's talking about to the north.
The top?
There are setback requirements. There are also some existing trees there that serve as a green buffer. And this is going to be, on that edge is going to be a 3-story tall building. And so keeping some of those trees could be beneficial to the abutters on that side of the property. So it's a balancing game when you're trying to position these concepts on sites. If it's critical that we not overlap the existing building during construction, then we'll have to take another stab at this to see whether or not that's achievable.
Just one more question, sorry. I noticed on the option 1 for the north school, both of the west face of the building, is that, cut in to provide lighting and?
For classrooms, yes. So one of the things that came out of visioning, we have obviously a lot of classrooms in this project, but we also have a lot of student support service spaces. And ideally, all of those environments would have direct access to daylight and views. And so that's what these options are achieving, and that's part of why there's maybe more perimeter than you might expect, is so that all of those spaces are daylit. Okay, great questions. It is all new construction. It does overlap the existing gym, and we already talked about the extensive retaining walls because of the topography that exists on the site that would likely be necessary. What's in that little box at the north end of the existing building is the gym and the locker rooms below, and there are a few classrooms down there. And if we were to execute this as it's drawn, that part of the existing building, what was an addition at one time, would have to come down as the first step. And so that means that the gym and those storage spaces and those few classrooms would either not exist or would need to be replicated with things like modular classrooms during construction, if in fact we can't get the new building off of the existing building during construction. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I can't see spending money like that, this is, let's be honest, this is gonna be a fiscal project for when it goes to town meeting. And it's gonna be a lot of money, especially if we go for new construction. I just can't see, spending money for modulars to bring in, and if we can tweak the shape of the building to make everything work, I think it's gonna be an easier sell.
Well, right, we're not at the stage where we're evaluating
Yeah,
options
no, I
yet.
get that, I get
Well,
that.
what I was going to say was, to satisfy the MSBA requirements for this grade configuration, only one new construction option somewhere in town needs to move forward, right? So not only does this site have the overlap the existing building challenge, it also has the utilities challenge, it has the topography challenge, it has extensive site work, right? It's got lots of sort of negative marks against it. And it may happen that this one is eliminated in the first round of shortening the list, and we don't need to work on it anymore for all the reasons that you've just described. But we fully recognize, right, if at all possible, we don't want modular classrooms, we don't want, students in the building while we're doing construction, right, all of those things. And if we have options that don't require that, those would be more attractive than options that do. We hear that.
So I understand that you took the same building structure from the north and fit it here. Had you considered a completely different design where you could take advantage of that green space towards the, I don't even know what side of the building, but, which is the lower topography at the bottom of the hill?
So interestingly, we did explore that a little bit, and what we found was that even as a three-story building, it takes up the entirety of the flat area on the lower level, which makes it very hard to get vehicles down there. And so now you've got an accessibility issue trying to get people and cars down to that lowest level, because now you've split the site this way for the entirety of the site. We can certainly try to prepare something more formal that expresses that, but we found that using that widest part, sort of the flattest part of the site that exists, was the way to achieve more of the site features that were desired than we would if we put a building only on the flat part of the site.
Another thing is the solar orientation of the building. So typically for classrooms, we like to have north light and south light. And in this configuration, it allows for that. If we were to put it parallel to the existing building, they'd actually have east and west light. So it also had to do with the solar orientation and classroom placement. So.
And when we haven't yet done this, but when we explore the ad reno version of this for this site, right, that bar of the existing building is likely to remain, and so some part of this, the addition would likely go on the existing fields much further south than what this diagram would suggest. So that would give you a sense of what that might be. And so here's a site with the first floor occupied. Again, it's 3 stories, with all the public things to the right and all of the sort of private things to the left. It does achieve that public-private separation.
And then we have the Wildwood site. I know you're all pretty familiar with this one by now, but 7.5 acres, also R20. So the setbacks of the 40-foot from the front property line and then 20 feet from the side and rear property lines is still in effect here. As I mentioned, infrastructure here, it's municipal water, but they do also have a septic system on site. Here, we do have the wellhead protection area on that north end of the site, and the wetlands with the 100-foot wetlands buffer also on the north end of the site. The buffer just touches the that north property line slightly, so we would just do our best to avoid that as we're designing. Obviously, this is a much smaller site, and trying to fit what you just saw on those other 2 larger sites. You'll see what happens next. And here we also do have grade changes. So from around the center of the site, you'll see that the highest point is at the center of the site, and you have 25-foot elevation changes that go towards the north end of the site. To the east end of the site, it's about a 15-foot grade change, and then down to the west side of the site, it's about 18-foot grade change when you go from the center of the site to the corner of the property lines. So technically here, because it's not an occupied site, the entire site is a buildable area, because we could go in, we could demolish the building if needed, or renovate the entire building if desired. Right off the bat, we wouldn't have to worry about working around an occupied building. So in this in this condition, the entire site is considered a buildable area, and there aren't enough restrictions such as wetlands in the middle of the site or anything like that that would prohibit us from building on the site.
So here's what a project of this size looks like on this site. You mentioned, grading and soils. In order to execute a project of this size on the site, elevating part of the site, raising part of the site may be necessary to achieve, a footprint of this size. It occupies almost the entirety of the site. Things like parking and site circulation are compromised as a result. It is all new construction. What's being shown is 3 stories. It is the cleanest construction phasing. Obviously, there's no students here, so you can complete the whole thing, including the site work, before moving students over.
Is there adequate parking on that site to support this project?
No. A project of this size, I think we counted 60 parking spaces in this particular concept, where we're targeting around 180. So just that fact alone makes this an unattractive solution to try to stuff, all of these potatoes in this really tiny bag.
I mentioned it the other day, Wildwood Street is a cut-through, and Wildwood Street could never handle the volume of traffic either way.
Right.
For a site like a school this size.
Right. And so we do have to explore the pre-K3 version, which will be a little smaller on this site, and even the pre-KK as new construction, which may be a better fit for this site. One of the questions we have for you, and it's not on our list for today, is a pre-K5 ad reno at this site is something that could be part of our due diligence, but once we made this drawing, right, we realized that trying to keep part of the existing building actually makes this problem even harder, and whether or not there's value in not exploring that because of what we know from generating this diagram.
Jason, again, ad reno on that building, I've been under it, and there's no part of that building I haven't been in. What would you save?
As little as possible. The MSBA will require us to have an ad reno of some kind on this site. Most likely, they would require it for the pre-KK grade configuration, and so we'll have to just make a determination about what the best parts of it to save.
How many square feet do you have to save to make it an ad reno?
Technically, there's no square footage requirement. We had a project where there was an auditorium that the district really liked, and we saved the auditorium, we demolished everything else around it and built a whole new building around the auditorium to qualify as an ad reno. It's like that old zoning thing where you keep one wall and you build a whole new house around what was your cabin, right? That would technically qualify as an ad reno.
With Wildwood, you may look at repurposing the gym.
Okay.
Right, as a suggestion.
Bulldoze it. Just bulldoze it.
So it will be part of our due diligence, most likely for the pre-KK, but we would be interested in your feedback about whether or not it makes sense to expend minutes on a pre-K5 ad reno at this site. Yeah, Paul?
Pre-KK, would that be a town-wide pre-KK?
No.
If there were to be a town, what's the population for pre-KK town-wide? Do you know, Dr. Brand?
Combined.
I'm just thinking, if we go from 850 down to
mid-threes.
mid-threes, so we conceivably could have a building half the size, pre-KK town-wide, and then there's some benefit for the entire town.
So unfortunately, that's not on the table right now, right? That's outside the agreed-upon enrollments with the MSBA.
Okay.
So the pre-KK agreed-upon enrollment, I believe, is 130 students, and it's only serving the north side of town. So exploring an option that is sized for all pre-KK children district-wide is not currently something we're allowed to explore.
Could you,
Is there any way they would allow us to explore that?
No. So the reason I can
The
be
easy
so
answer is no.
definitive with that is last summer, the town and the district went through a process with the MSBA asking those kinds of questions. We understand that we've agreed to these 3 enrollments. Are there other things that we can explore? And their response was yes, if you exit the program first. And so, right, nobody wanted to do that. So we're just sort of staying within the confines of what we've been given by the MSBA in terms of enrollments.
could we design the current enrollment, put a field and maybe in the future build a different wing. We'll be looking at an option, but kind of mirror what we build, just double. Or is there, that doesn't, then we run into shortages of staff spaces and gyms or others.
Well, anything's possible. Doran Whittier's been tasked with only designing something to serve the enrollments that are in front of us and sort of designing something that could be expanded to do something completely different in the future. Right now, it's outside our scope. Other questions about this? I'll make one final observation about the interior layout of this. It is 3 stories, but because the site is so compact, unlike the other 3 options that we've seen, this concept is unable to achieve separation of public and private, right? In order to provide the right kind of egress, access to the gym, access to art rooms. The classrooms essentially circumnavigate those core spaces. And so this would fall short of achieving that idea of separating public spaces and classroom spaces.
Outside of having to look at an ad reno, if you note, for an option on the site, could we make this the only time we look at this site for pre-K 5? Is that what you're?
Well, we had originally thought that we need to be able to respond to questions from the community about, yes, but did you think about this scenario, or did you think about that scenario? So we're trying to put all 3 grade configurations on all 3 sites under consideration. And so this was our effort to put the biggest grade configuration on the smallest site.
Well, you know, it's like, looking at the site for the smaller configurations makes sense. I guess, can we say, is this the only thing we look at for pre-K to 5? And the due diligence is we show how much the building takes up on the site and all the check boxes that don't meet.
Potentially, yes. You know, would you want to attempt to put pre-K 3 on this site because it's a little bit smaller, right? That's the question. Is a community member going to ask to see that exploration at some point in the future? I think from the Doran Whittier team, if a new construction is this size for pre-K 5, then it's likely that an ad reno for pre-K 5 may actually gobble up more site even than this because of the constraints of having to work with the existing building. And so therefore it might not make sense to explore that scenario. But new pre-K 3, we don't have a disposition about that yet. We don't think it would be required by the MSBA, but it might be something worth doing for due diligence.
Would it be any smaller, or would you just be taking off that top floor?
Yes, it would be a little smaller. 2 grades would be disappearing. And the gym changes size, which would be a game changer for this particular site. If you remember, programmatically, the pre-K 5 has the 12,000, the high school size gym, but the pre-KK has a much more modest multi-purpose space, and so that could really make a big difference for the pre-K 3. Yeah.
So the conclusion we just came to then is that the North Intermediate site checks the most boxes.
So far. So far, right? We've only explored 4 of what are 18.
For pre-KK. I mean, pre-K through 5.
Yeah.
So far, yes, correct. Correct.
So as you just said, we are looking at pre-K 5 today, right? We are still going to look at pre-K 3 for next week, for 2 weeks from now, and also pre-KK options. And then the intent of having several options on the table is so that you have different flavors for the different configurations, but you also have different price points for when we go out to evaluate these options, right? And one of the next steps that's going to happen is we're going to have to evaluate all of these options. This is an example of a matrix that we will work with you to put together. On the left side of this, you see that there's different site criteria, there's building criteria, there'll be educational criterias, and each of those criterias will look at each option and we will rank them. You know, do they meet the needs or do they not meet the needs? And then we will add those numbers up, and that will help us evaluate of the options which one meets all of the goals or the most goals, and which are the more favorable, which are the least favorable. And then from this process, it'll help us to prioritize certain options to move forward and certain ones that we will see as less desirable and we would not need to further study, and that would be our recommendation to the MSBA. As it's been mentioned in the meeting, we do have to move forward with 1 pre-KK, 1 pre-K 3, 1 pre-K 5. We do need to have ad renos, and we do need to have some new. We will also look at a base repair option at each site, and that will help us to have a baseline to start with from a cost standpoint. If you think about, for example, if you do a pre-KK option, there's going to be a cost for that, but down the road, you will have the grades 1 through 3 and the grades 4 to 5, and those buildings, at the end of the day, will still need some work at some point. So at least you will have some numbers to evaluate a pre-K 5 option versus a pre-KK versus a pre-K 3. And then those will have ed reno and new options with that. So, this will be something we're going to start working on. I do think, just based on this meeting, that next week, the majority of the time will be spent on reviewing the many options that we have still to review with you. So, but we will start to introduce the evaluation criteria for us to start thinking about to move forward, and that'll start to be the focus of next month.
Paul, you had another question?
No.
Change your mind?
I'm thinking out of the box, but I think I'm too far out of the box, so.
You might as well ask.
Is it a worthwhile exercise to do an analysis of a town-wide pre-KK financed by the town as opposed to another school, and then step out of the MSBA process? If we come up with a school that's half the size, is that worthwhile? You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, what's the reimbursement from MSBA right now? Maybe 40%? Ish?
Doesn't the MSB project require the Wildwood population to be part of it, because that was our
Yes.
fundamental school? I don't.
Yes, but
So we'd be losing out, what, the second and third?
We would, if you pursue, I'm sorry, Dave.
No.
If that was a decision that the town was to entertain somehow, and that's a whole question around how to get to that point, we would
Yeah.
have to withdraw from the MSBA program.
Right, and that's why I think I'm too far out of the box for that. But in terms of having a town-wide pre-KK, I mean, you have centralized services, you have a centralized location, and I see benefits to that, but I think
Oh,
that.
what about, go along that same vein, if we pursue the pre-K through 5 as an option, and then we continue with that mantra when we finish this project and we enter our next MSBA project to put it pre-K through 5 on the west side of town. And now we're severely is the wrong adjective, consolidating our schools. We end up going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Six.
to 2.
No, I get
You
it.
know?
I get it. I'm just trying to flesh out everything.
yeah, and right, it's always great to, explore all of the potential there is.
Yeah.
For our team and for this project, though, there is a box that we have to stay in. And until someone tells us we're not in that box anymore, right, we need to continue down that particular path.
Yep.
I think it's probably worth just a reminder, not just for folks here, but those maybe who watching and sort of wonder, well, how then did we get here, and what was sort of the decision-making that brought us to this point and this box, to use your analogy, right? When we as a school community, supported by the select board, the school committee, and ultimately the town, we applied, we authorized the submission of statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority for all 6 elementary schools. We submitted 6. My office submitted 6. And just again, as a big picture, that's a signal to this grant funding partner to say, look, we have 6 schools that are really in need of, we need help. They're aged, they're quite dated, and we need some help, and we're looking for help. And they evaluated us, and they said, we get that, but you need to identify one priority project. That's the rule of that game. And so it was a pretty easy decision, of course, and that was the identification of the Wildwood. And that was before it was closed, keep that in mind. And it was through that avenue and that path where we also took a very broad look at the town's facilities master plan that pointed in the direction of consolidation. And because Wildwood was the priority project, we backed sort of into that, or entered into the box of the other schools that we're looking at here. There's a whole lot of work still to come, and you've more than hinted at that.
Yeah.
Looking more at the age of the facilities, and there's all different kinds of approaches here. If my understanding is if this school is likely to open, should it be ultimately, whatever decision it is, and was supported by the town, in 2029, Julie? Is that right, give or take? 2028. The age of the Wildwood at that point in time will be 73 years old. The age of the Woburn Street will be 65 years old. and the north will be 64. And that's pretty much mirrored on the other side of town. So it just, that's not to, in and of itself, doesn't sway or change some of the many decisions that are going to have to be made as an entity, but that's what we're talking about. So that's, again, sort of to the extent that we are exploring consolidation, I think that's why we're in this box, whatever that will come out of this, so.
When we put this up to vote for the town, how many options do we need to present? Just one?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's basically the conclusion of our evaluations.
Right, we're
Okay.
gonna take all of these, and we'll, through this committee, narrow them down to that one final option. And so this is the first step. The ones that are highlighted in yellowish, those are the ones that were reviewed today. And on the 25th, sorry. We're gonna do the same thing with pre-K3 and pre-KK. So by the time we conclude that meeting, we'll be able to use this type sample criteria to kind of go through and weed through and say, yeah, that's a non-starter. Don't waste any more effort on putting a pre-K to 5 on, as an example, the Wildwood site, because number one, you can't get the parking. Number two, there's no place for the kids to play outside, so it's a non-starter. And then, we continue to go through. We have to present in our PDP, which is the preliminary design phase submission to the MSBA, which we will be submitting. We'll be getting estimates in mid-March and submitting that in the end of April to the MSBA. And then from there, we take that and move on to the preliminary, the PSR phase, the preliminary schematic report, and that's where we narrow it down even further. And from there, that's when we go to town vote. And town vote would be a year from May. So we have, so it's about 15 months from now where we need to make a decision on what project we're going to try and move forward. Town vote will be in 15 months, but, so it seems like it's a long ways off, but you'll blink and it'll be here. And we'll be standing, in town vote, explaining to everyone why we need this project. And leading up to that, we'll have numerous community forums to provide the information to the public and get their feedback as well.
So before we move away from this slide, we do have a question for the group. You notice at the bottom of this matrix is the town hall site. When that was first identified as a potential for this project, it was in response to, well, what if it doesn't fit anywhere else? And so to date, our Dorn Whittier team hasn't explored anything on the town hall site. And now that we have at least one site where we're confident that a new pre-K 5 could fit as the largest potential thing, is there interest in continuing to explore the town hall for one or more of these grade configurations? Or is it the disposition of this group that because we have something that fits on one of the 3 existing sites, there's no need to look at town hall? Maybe I'll just invite a conversation around that, if anybody has a disposition about that.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the accessibility of the street, just getting there in the morning, and that the idea of that amount of traffic coming down that street, I just don't know how that would work.
Yeah, when Kevin Carr was here last time, he mentioned something about an issue with some of the land, and I don't know anything about that article. I think it was 90 land.
Right, Article 97.
97. So I don't know how that would impact the rest of the property and how much of that land is the problem. So that may not even allow for the site to even be considered, right?
Maybe, right, article, go ahead.
Article 97, it really has to do with the adjacent property and the way that the lines are currently drawn right now. There might be some overlap onto the town hall site. So until that is confirmed, we wouldn't know, but we have to assume that there's a potential that a portion of the site could fall under Article 97, which would require going to the legislature to have approval to change the use of this property.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of hoops to go through if, in fact, it falls under Article 97. And so that was one of the concerns that Mr. Kyra raised. And he also did mention that there are some other uses that people have been discussing around town for that site. And, so whether or not we needed to look at it, so he did raise that at the last meeting. And it's the decision of this group to decide whether or not that site is pursued or not.
If you had to go to the legislature to get change for that property, how long does that usually take? Is that a year process? Is that a 2-year process? Because that could really change the whole scope of the job.
It's definitely months.
How good is your legislature?
Yeah. It's a months-long process, and, typically, whatever land that you take, under Article 97, you would have to replicate someplace else in town.
Okay, so like they did for the high school.
Right.
Right.
We got rid of the pedway at the Wildwood going up Federal Street and some other spots
Yeah.
to make up for that land.
That was the riverfront land with the
Yep.
the building of the field.
Yeah.
And it's definitely doable. You just have to factor it into
Into
your
the schedule.
schedule.
Yeah.
And when you would need to go to.
And then finding land to replace it in town, which could be the schools we're tearing down.
Exactly, the schools that you're tearing down in order to utilize that site.
Other thoughts about Town Hall, whether or not the design team should explore options on that site?
Susan, am I wrong? The selectmen form a subcommittee to explore reuse of that site?
I don't recall them actually, they discussed one, but I'm not sure that they formed one to
Okay,
discuss
so I wasn't sure if
reuse
there was
of it.
something in the works looking at.
Yeah, they had talked about, just in terms of any of the sites that are being left behind, the senior center and that kind of thing, to establish a committee about reuse, but I don't think it's been done yet. I can confirm that for next meeting, though, I'm not sure.
What's the size of that site?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's larger than any of the other sites that are being considered.
So larger than north as well?
Yes.
More than
Yeah.
above 14 acres?
How much effort is it to lay the drawing over?
Well, it's, the same as preparing any other option. It's minutes. It's not any additional money to you in terms of our fee to explore that. It's part of our due diligence. But once we take that step, then it's got to run all the way through the process, right? It's not like we can develop something quick and dirty, put it up on the screen, and then immediately dismiss it, right? Once we put effort into that, because of MSBA being our partner, we have to develop it to the same level of detail as everything else. It has to go through the evaluations process, and then it has to either stay or get further developed in the next step. So it would have to be just like all of the other scenarios.
There's been, obviously, understandably, concerns raised about just how could we envision traffic going down Glen Road to access there. I remember, though, somebody previously said there may be another, and I just don't know the area that well, maybe another access point. Is that accurate, or is that on the other side? And I can't be more specific in describing that, but
Either of them would go through a residential neighborhood.
has to go, okay.
Where is it centrally located as far as proximity to some of the other schools? And the
Opposite side of town, right?
I mean, to me, it's on the other side of town. Glen Road is very narrow and very twisty. There's another railroad crossing. There is another, I mean, if buses went down to Main Street north, they took a right on the street just past the church and the senior center, they could run straight into that, but that's also adding a lot of minutes and many traffic points.
I think given the road, the site location, the sports fields, you're gonna open yourself up to a war with Pop Warner and everybody else if you
Little
try
League,
and.
Pop Warner. And I know Kevin mentioned they're trying to get the hockey rink there, if we ever get a hockey rink. So all those different groups may come out of the woodworks against the
I
project.
don't think I'd support looking at.
Just go back to the basic. If we added Town Hall site in case something didn't fit, and now we've proven it fits, we would just take it out based on that basic logic.
Can you say that one more time?
Town halls may be considered in case they couldn't fit a pre-K-5 anywhere. Since we've done that, should we then use that as the reason to take Town Hall out? Keep it as simple as that. Or were there other reasons that people propose Town Hall?
As long as you have in your back pocket a way to replicate those fields somewhere else, then you can eliminate that opposition to a project,
You guys bring up a great point, which I'm wondering is, and this is pushing the boundaries of this group, who is looking at the grand plans to look at all of the puzzle pieces, to say that if we use this here and we free up the Wildwood space, can we put the hockey rink at the Wildwood location, and can we use the town hall for this? Like, who's maximizing every space that we have available?
In 2015, we did the facility master plan to look at
Yeah.
all this stuff, and all these topics came up, and they try to figure out what needed to be done. So, as part of that would be what the thought process was, what these sites could be used for, and now, you know, as time's gone on, people have different visions or different ideas. So, you'd have to figure out what was there and what we determined back then, and then obviously things have changed.
The problem we
But the
had on the permanent
considerations.
building committee in citing the senior center, we potentially cited the senior center, or there was an option to cite the senior center at the Glen Road site. But that would hinge on a successful vote for town hall being built. So you're gonna have some problems if you start having projects that hinge on the succession of other projects to occur. And that just takes too much out of the timeline, and we ultimately didn't wanna do that.
But I think
I
the
see what
answer-
you're saying, though, but.
The answer to your question is really what Paul brought up before, and the fact that they had brought up having a committee to look at all those, because now that we actually have successful, efforts on projects, we actually have something to consider. And I think when we didn't have successful, town votes for the projects, it wasn't real enough to really consider that we were gonna have those buildings to do something with.
So if we were to summarize this conversation, it sounds like there's an awful lot of reasons to not explore a school project on the town hall site. And I didn't hear anybody express a compelling reason to explore a school project on the town hall site.
I think the compelling reason would be that it's similar to the Wildwood site.
And then it's
that
free and clear.
It's free and clear. You
Yes.
can just tear down the old town hall and build fresh there. And also you just have lots of space for parking.
Right.
Lots of, just
Agreed.
the size of the site.
It's the
So
size,
the parking may be the insoluble problem. If you take away field space there are other places that are gonna come offline once a new school is built where you can recover field space. That kind of thing might be solvable, but the traffic might be just the sticking point.
That's a no-starter, I think.
Well, keep in mind too, with the town hall site, if this is only gonna service half the town, you've now put it possibly near where the other half the town school is gonna go on the Shawsheen, which may be the biggest site on this side of town, that side of town. So now you've got the Woburn Street side of the school trying to get all the way over to Glen Road, and then the west side of the town going to the Shaw. So everything moves, both schools move to the same side of town, in my thought. Tewksbury, Billerica line.
With respect to parking, one thing I don't hear about is an option of putting in a garage to accommodate additional spaces.
That's true, and that is always a possibility. It's more of an urban solution than it is a suburban solution, and they tend to be very, very expensive, cost prohibitive to do parking structures. So we tend to stay away from them unless there's an absolute need to explore that. And we did have one project in an urban setting where we explored elevating the building and putting a parking structure under the existing, or under the proposed building. Ultimately didn't get pursued, but we have explored those kinds of things in other communities.
The only reason why the town hall site, I understand the traffic constraints and the close proximity to the other side of town. It's just, there's a lot more land, there's a lot more ability to have play structure, and don't forget, if we do decide to have a sustainable building and we are going to put some canopies, now the site shrinks even more of any of the sites we select.
When you say canopies, you mean canopies?
Solar canopies for, a sustainable
Like over a parking lot?
over parking, or just to make sure that we have the correct number to offset the output of the building.
Well, one thing we talked about the other day, Wilmington is under a 20-year power purchase agreement with Reading Municipal Light. We cannot get solar from anyone else unless we
Right.
buy it outright. So
Right.
Wilmington went to buy the solar panels outright to do those canopies, which adds another cost to, and I don't know what the ROI on that would be to pay them off with the electrical savings, but I don't know if solar would really be a benefit for Wilmington at this point. It would help Reading Light keep their costs down, which may help our rates in the future, but that we wouldn't use it in the school because it wouldn't go to us, it would go to them.
Julie, can I ask you as our OPM, seems like a rather important decision in terms of deciding whether or not to explore this other site, or Vivian yourself as in your role of OPM. I know we are clearly quickly sort of jumping to, we can't imagine or envision the traffic and the access points, but trying to be optimistic and down the road, perhaps a pre-K-5 emerges as the preferred option, but clearly you've done what you can to model with the buildings you've got to work with. It's unfortunate we don't have an empty 10-acre campus, or however many, but we don't. There could very easily be some strong feelings around such a large building of so many stories, even at the north. Do we, as a committee, set ourselves up for problems if we don't more thoroughly take a position on the town hall, or gather more information before doing so? I guess the question comes of, if down the line, if we haven't demonstrated that we've thoroughly come to an opinion on or decision on the town hall, could that be problematic for us when we're trying to push ahead, let's just say hypothetically, a pre-K-5 school that's obviously going to be a very large structure, even on the north site?
I think that, in my opinion, we're doing our due diligence on all three of the school sites. And, having this large parcel of land, pretty much readily available, I think, in my opinion, it cannot hurt you to look at that site. However, we've heard some really strong opposition to this. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of people in favor, other than what Mr. Ragsdale said earlier, was that, that it is a kind of wide open site. The majority of the feedback that we've received from the four boards, including this setting, is that no one would like us to explore that as an option. I just want to make sure I'm clear, Dennis, is there gas and sewer at that site?
Sewer is on Main Street. I don't believe it's on Glen Road. It might be on Glen Road. And then the natural gas is on Main Street, so again, you have to pull from Main Street all the way down.
Right, so, we talk about that on Woburn Street, we talk about that on Wildwood, that, there is no town sewer there. And those are deterrents that we've been talking about. Same thing is applicable here. It could be shown as a deterrent. For this exercise, because of the feedback that we've received, Dore and Whittier did not explore this as an option. And I think that the direction that we're looking for from this committee tonight is, do you want us to explore that? Because it's large open space. Or are all the negatives, Papuana potentially putting a hockey rink? I mean, these are all future issues, but the fact of the matter is the space itself is available, or should be available anyway. So I wish that I could say one way or another. What I've heard from almost everyone is that they do not want us to look at that as an option.
I don't know. I'm with David.
I feel as though the site is vacant, we wouldn't have to have any swing space. It's large enough that we could potentially even avoid some of the Article 97 land. And I hear the concerns of the sewer, but we face that on other parcels as well. The only one that doesn't is the North Intermediate. But a size of the school of this size, even on the North Intermediate, you're limiting where you have play area. And at least, I think it's worthwhile looking at the town hall. I hear the traffic concerns, but I feel you're gonna have that, it's a large number of students. You're gonna have that anywhere you go, so.
Paul and then David.
I think Dr. Brand raises a valid point, due diligence. I'd hate to stand up at town meeting and say we ruled the site out over a 20-minute discussion.
Agreed.
So even though I'm not in favor of the site, maybe we just look at it and we know for sure.
Yep.
David.
And this is basically my thought as well, that
Yeah.
for support for whatever option we do choose, we are going to have to be in front of people and say, we explored all the viable options, and
Right.
we thought that this was the best one. And if we choose not to explore this further, then we need to have really good, solid reasons that we can give to people of why we chose not to pursue it any
Agreed,
further.
and just saying that the traffic concerns, I don't feel is a strong enough or a valid enough argument.
Right.
If we look at town hall, are there other options we should also rule out at the same time to not look at?
What do you mean?
I don't think that
Are
they
you
were.
thinking
Add
like, for
Reno at
example-
Wildwood for
Oh.
pre-K through
I
5,
think
because
you
we've seen a new
don't you have-
construction.
By MSBA, you
doesn't
have to
quite fit.
go through the same, or?
So technically, no, right? The MSBA requires a repair, an add reno, and a new for each grade configuration, but not necessarily at every site under consideration. And so, for example, we could say, all right, we're not gonna develop an add reno pre-K 5 at the existing Wildwood site because we saw what a new looks like on that parcel. And I think the MSBA would likely be okay with that. I defer to you on that, but in our,
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think on the town hall site, I would only want to see a brand-new K through 5 being the
And-
largest of the school sizes.
and not the other two. Well, right, if we're exploring this as due diligence, then it might make sense to do all three grade configurations on that parcel.
And I hesitate to take anything off the table at this point, too. Like, we're so early in this process, you know. I'd rather have options than you know, constrain
I have one other
ourselves.
thing. I hear what you're saying, but like, say you move it there. So someone that goes to the West Intermediate right now for 4th and 5th grade, right, wouldn't go to the new school. They live on Grove Ave, which is right near the town hall. They wouldn't go to the new school because that's the zone for the other side. So now I may live closest to that school, but I'm still going to the west, correct? So flow for you guys, you're bringing people all the way across town. Does it work for the flow of getting kids to and from school and community?
But, I mean, I think everything will be certainly so, if we are talking about a pre-K to 5 school, and that's being presumptuous, but if we are, I mean, the whole transportation system will look, of course, completely different. There are lots of variables, and these are artificial boundaries at the end of the day. We would have to
Districting.
adjust those.
It's variable, yeah.
And, right, everybody's saying exactly the right thing. This step in the process is about turning over as many stones as you can.
Right.
So that the community knows that you did all of your due diligence. And all the things that you're citing, Dennis, may be reasons to eliminate the town hall from consideration, but at least we can let everybody know that we did explore it.
Yeah, or, I mean, maybe the town hall is a perfect example when we look at that side of town down the road, that you're looking at the Shawshene field and the town hall field for that side of town.
Could be.
Yet if you're truly looking at the other side of town for a school to consolidate those three, you'd want it on that side of town. I don't know, that's the way I'm envisioning it, but, you know.
I understand
Yeah.
that, and I appreciate the comment. I just feel that if we're gonna stand in front of a group of audience and a group of residents to explain, the first question is gonna come up is, did you look at the town hall, especially since it's vacant? And it would be nice to have a valid response to say, yes, we did look at it, we examined it, and for these reasons, it was considered not appropriate for this project.
And if you end up with the smaller schools, you're ending up with less traffic.
Less what?
Traffic.
Yep.
Okay, so is that, we don't need to take a formal vote, but we want to have clear direction for our design team that we are going to explore all three grade configurations on the town hall site, and we'll do everything we can to bring those illustrations to you, along with the rest of the options the next time we meet. Is that the
Yes.
direction? Yep. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that.
Just for the record, there is an 8-inch sewer that goes to town hall, it looks like.
So, sort of lost track, forgive me, of the agenda, just to clarify, we really, Jason, you've covered 4 and 5, would you say, next steps?
Yes.
Yes.
And schedule update?
Schedule update is that we will be meeting in 2 weeks, the 25th, which is a Thursday. And then following that, on February 1st, we will be having a community forum to discuss all of the options in which, or a presentation about the options that were shown this evening and will be shown on the 25th.
Thank you. The next item, item number 7, the Public Relations Working Group. Vivian?
So, thank you. The Public Relations or Communications Working Group has met a few times, and as an update, there are boards that were approved last time, agreed upon, and have been distributed throughout various properties, schools, and library, as well as town hall, to have a QR code for individuals to kind of click onto and connect to the project website and get more information. And that was the original intent, and that is what it has fulfilled. The committee has, the working group has also met subsequent to that, and we are looking for more volunteers. If anyone is interested from this group to participate, we highly recommend that. We are a group of 3 at the moment, and there is a lot of work to be done ahead of us, and so more assistance is absolutely welcomed. We are also working in town with the PAWS group to solicit some assistance from them and input and to broadcast our communication outwardly from their means. As one of the other items in regards to the working group, we are also looking to see if, we highly recommend this committee attend the public forums. It is a great way for us to hear firsthand from the community on how they are perceiving, receiving, and understanding, interpreting the design thus far, and what their comments are in order to help us come to a conclusion and a selection at the end. So I really strongly advise everyone to attend. That's all.
Thanks, Vivian. Julie?
If anyone would like to see a copy of the board, you can head to the gym. It's right outside the gym. We've put 7 out among town, and after our community forum, we will replace those boards. So as the project continues to evolve, we will continue to replace them so that it is in the forefront of parents and students, and people can use the QR reader to see what the project's all about. It takes you to the website, which has all of the most up-to-date information, all the presentations, all of the meeting minutes, any videos that we've taken. So all of that information is provided there. So just want to make sure everyone knows that we'll continue to update that as we go along with the project.
Thank you.
Is there, are there social media plans, Wilmington Apple, et cetera?
All of those. We have started doing our research and looking to see how we can broadcast to all of those social networks. And included in it is also having a table at the farmer's market, the Spring Fest that is planned, as well as other activities in town. That's why we're looking for participation from various groups in town to help manage those, as well as additional support from this committee.
I wonder if there's a way to recruit students
I would love
in
that.
terms of like a social media
Social
thing.
Heck, yeah.
For the social media aspect, absolutely. But it does require, once we get into some of the Spring Fest and public presence, it would be nice to have people from this committee answering questions, receiving questions, and understanding what it is that are some of the concerns of the public.
But it reminds me, and I can talk to the high school administration here, we've done this in the past for community service projects and/or
Internships.
senior possibility too.
Yeah.
You know, and there very easily could be children, I can imagine some students who are particularly wed to this project because
Sure.
of their own personal experiences.
Sure, even if it's something as simple as a TikTok video and
Right.
it could go viral locally and
Right, I will
spread
explore
spread the word.
Great.
Thank you.
Is it safe to say that at a minimum, we can take the email that you sent us, Glenn, earlier in the week with the poster, that we can at least share that on our social media platforms?
And thank you for that, because that raises a point. How is that being broadcasted at the moment? How is that being communicated that there is a public forum?
That flyer that Tracy created has been pushed out through our network to all of our email contacts, parents, guardians, and there are thousands. It has been shared. She sent it to, I believe, the library, the senior center, town hall. I'm probably missing a few, but
Is it possible to have it flashing, you know, somewhere in town as you're driving down that
We can certainly-
public forum?
Public safety building.
We've
Yeah,
used,
the
the
public
Permanent
safety.
Building Committee has used water bills to put out our updates.
Yeah.
So if there's a flyer that can be stuffed into a water bill, if the timing is right, we can get it printed and get it in the water bill. Everybody gets a water bill.
Yeah. I know I do.
Okay. Good. Yeah, great, great thoughts, thank you. Are you good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, item number 8, discussion correspondence or new items tonight? Julie?
The one item for discussion that we had explored for the beginning of December, but we shelved, which was attending one more school tour. We had originally talked about doing that in December. There was a Tewksbury Elementary School that was just finished being built. I reached out. They were excited to show us. So I wanted to offer that as an opportunity to members of this committee who did not have an opportunity to attend any of the tours that we have taken previously, and see if there was an interest in doing that. I know that when we're seeing the nice color-coded designs that Doran Whittier put together, sometimes it's hard to envision, and one of the questions that Susan had asked and Paul had asked about the space in the corridor and how we call it, we call it breakout space or front porches or whatever. But to see that in person, to understand how that works and translates with, a classroom, it was a great question by Susan, do you require additional staff to manage that space? But if you see it in person and you see how it works, sometimes there's a glass sliding door that opens and they can open up, and so, one class can use their space. Sometimes there are classes that they all open it and they co-teach. I'm not suggesting anyone change the way they teach. I'm just telling you, in other communities, that's how they've done it. Actually, it was the Hanscom School that they use that a lot. So I open that up to everyone, and if you're interested, I can reach out back to the school and try and schedule us another tour. They were very accommodating last time. We scheduled it for, I think it was like the 1 o'clock hour. It gave you enough time to see the students in the classroom, or at specials, but didn't interfere with drop-off and pickup.
I
So,
think that's a really important piece as a teacher, for everyone to go in and see the academic settings and see how they're utilized, because it looks so different when it's a little block up there. But when you get to go in and you get to see the kids and the staff using those spaces, it's really important for your understanding. So I highly suggest that, really good point.
thank you.
I echo that sentiment. I mean, being in the profession, I see it day in and day out, but it doesn't come close to the blocks and the images you see on paper, to the actual live use of the space and how it flows. I would go.
I'm interested in going. I was signed up before we had to cancel.
Okay. So I think, it's a large group of people, so it's challenging to ask everyone what their schedules are. Sarah had sent out previously, doodle polls and things of the such. But I understand everybody works, everybody, has obligations to their families as well. So I'll give it a couple of weeks' notice. I'll reach out to Tewksbury, see if we can schedule it for an afternoon, so that, give people enough time to accommodate their schedules. Does that sound acceptable to everyone?
Yes.
Great.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
I'll reach out tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other new items of business tonight? Seeing none, item number 9, committee questions.
Sorry,
You again,
back up
Julie?
to one,
Okay.
one more. Yes,
Okay.
we are we're working on scheduling a sustainable working group meeting. So moving forward on our agenda, we'll have working groups, and then we'll list them below, and then we can report back. But we are working on scheduling a meeting so we can start talking about sustainability goals for this project. And, if there's any members of the town that would like to attend as well, so that we can get maybe broader sustainability goals from the town that would be implemented on this project, it'd be super helpful. Ronnie, Dennis, yep.
He's already sitting on that, right?
Ronnie and I are meeting next Thursday, I think we
Next
changed the
Tuesday.
day, next
Next
Tuesday, with a group called Undaunted K-12. I know, I'm trying to, I have to read it like it's in an email. Undaunted K-12. It is a nonprofit that works with communities to help them maximize their benefits from sustainability goals. So we are meeting with Sarah. I was put in contact with her. There was an article actually that Marianne Galezzo had sent forward to everyone. And one of the schools was a school in New Bedford. And the architect and I are pretty close. And so I reached out to him, asked him for some assistance. He got us the contact. And so now we're going to meet with with Sarah next week. So we'll report back at our next meeting about what we've learned and how we can move forward. You know, you have the PPA, so there's some constraints, but that's good to know so that we can share that with her. Maybe she has some kind of an end around or another way that we can explore that, as well as geothermal and things of that nature.
As well as the Inflation Reduction Act, if you
Yep,
guys
the
can look at
IRA,
that.
yep.
And that's a big part of it, is just trying to understand it. It's still
Okay.
so new that everyone's
Right.
still trying to figure out and
Right.
navigate it, right?
We're-
So
the town of Swampscott is doing that currently with their geothermal wells, and they have already submitted their application and process, so if you need assistance in trying to navigate through, I've kind of have firsthand.
We've done that in Stoneham as well.
Yeah.
Yep, so, but we thought maybe it would be really great to have someone who's an expert in this and someone who, this is what they do. So it would be great for them to kind of guide us and kind of come along for the ride. So we'll report back on that at the next meeting.
And might that be something we can open up to other residents or
Sure.
students that aren't a part
Absolutely.
of this committee?
Absolutely.
Julie, this committee goes all the way through construction of the building, right? We stay together through the whole, I mean, our mission might change a bit once, obviously, we know what we're building, where we're building, but then we continue on, kind of like Town Hall and Senior Center committees are doing now.
Yeah, we'll stay together through the process, even through into MSBA closeout. At the point in which the building is completed, punch list is done, and MSBA is doing your final audit, we'll taper off a little bit. We won't have to meet every month, and if we do, it could be virtual, it could be quicker. But yes, this process, we'll be real close for a
We're
while.
like family.
Yeah. For a while.
7 years, I knew you when. Oversharing after all.
And this is, it's like an arc, right? You start here, and this is where we're going right now, and it's gonna go up like this when we're in construction, and you're gonna be in the heat of it, and then you're gonna come back down for closeout. So think of it, just like that.
So all the more reason why we have to work together to get this project passed.
That's right.
So we
That's
stay
right.
together.
Public comments. Ms. Bissell, you're not part of the public, right? Very far removed. Seeing none. Next meeting has been mentioned, Thursday, January 25th, and that is virtual. Thank you for all of the time. Thank you for your presentation. Obviously, exciting, important work here that we're stepping into. With that, unless there's anything else tonight, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Roll call, please.
Paul?
Yes.
Kate? Yes. Christine?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Dr. Brand?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Thanks, everyone, and good evening.